Hey guys, how's it going? Roger says hey. Scarlett says hey too. She just plopped down on the floor behind me. But we are going to be watching the lead up to World War One. Now, I had planned to start the Great War series today because it is July 28th, and that is the day that World War One got kicked off, apparently, according to the internet. So I wanted to start the Great War video today. I completely forgot though that several of you guys asked me to watch this series, The Seminal Tragedy, which leads up to World War One, so I could understand the circumstances that led up to it. And you guys said that this would give me like a lot more context for the Great War series. So I am probably going to postpone doing the Great War, starting with the Great War, a couple of days, and or I don't know. I don't know how long it's gonna take me to get through this. It's not gonna be a long dragged out series. I'm gonna try to knock these videos out pretty quickly, but we're going to. I think there are 4 or 5 of them. So I'm going to do these. It might be the weekend, honestly, realistically, when I post the first Great War video, and then we will do them. It's supposed to be like week by week. So I was gonna start week 1 on today, and then like just do them like every Wednesday or whatever. So I might do the first one like on the weekend. I'll be a few days late just because this snuck up on me. I totally forgot about this series. So Great War, first episode video this weekend probably, and then next Wednesday we will do the second one, so we'll get back on track with that. So that's the plan. So I don't know anything about what the Seminal Tragedy is. I don't really know anything about what led up to World War One. I think the Archduke of... I don't remember which Archduke was assassinated, but I know an Archduke was assassinated, and that is technically like what started the war or something like that. But again, like I feel like I don't really know all of the circumstances and details behind it. So that might be covered in this series for all I know. Anyway, I don't really have anything else to say about it because I don't know anything about it. So we're gonna dive into episode 1, video 1. I got some M&Ms right here as well that I might be eating a little bit while I watch this. So alright, let's check out the Seminal Tragedy, episode 1 from Extra History. Never done a video from this channel yet.
Human history is equal parts heroism, tragedy, and misunderstanding. Very rarely have we displayed all 3 to such a degree as in the First World War. This war is called the seminal catastrophe of the 20th century, because without it there is no Stalin and no Hitler, no fascism or World War II. Without it, we don't have a Cold War that leads us to the very brink of annihilation, nor do we see the Middle East carved up by old men, still bitter from 4 years of meaningless self-inflicted catastrophe. Without this war, we probably don't have 9/11 or the turmoil in the Middle East today. This war ushered in the modern age, born in a crucible of gunpowder and toxic smoke and the blood of 10 million men. Blood spilt in war from the fields of France to the waters off America, from the Russian frontier to the sands of the Middle East, from the Chinese mainland to the deepest parts of the sea. This war broke empires. It shattered the past and forced us to give up our last ties to our medieval understanding. When the smoke cleared and a stunned world climbed out of its trenches, we lived in a new age, with new powers, new ideas, and new terrors. It is the defining event of the 20th century. It is the Great War. But it's not the war itself that we're here to talk about today. Hopefully, over the course of this show, a bit at a time, we'll slowly, story by story, cover the sprawling events of this turning point in history. But today we are focused on the events that led to this war. For if the war...
I didn't realize about any of that about World War One. That it was such a pivotal event in the 20th century that it kind of divided time in a lot of ways for what he said, like their ties going back to the medieval ages. So there's like pre-World War One, or War. I can't talk. It's kind of hard to say World War, you know. There's pre-World War One, and then there is post-World War One. From the sounds of it, so I had no idea that it was thought of in that way, actually. So that's good to know. Actually, going into this
turning point in history. But today we are focused on the events that led to this war. For if the war itself is the seminal catastrophe of the 20th century, then the weeks before the war are its seminal tragedy. In these next few episodes, we'll focus on the very human, very personal stories that led Europe to consume itself, to ignite itself in one suicidal blaze from which it still hasn't recovered, because it is a tragedy of the highest order. It's like a play, a Greek epic, a story so grand we would think it must be fiction, if the scars of the war couldn't still be seen on the fields of France. It's Shakespeare living out before us. It begins with the death of a prince and his lady, and ends in mass slaughter the likes of which the world has never seen. So let's set the stage. For 100 years, Europe has been at peace. There have been wars, sure, but they were minor wars. Wars on the periphery. Wars without many of the great powers involved. Not since Napoleon did the great states of Europe vie in bloody battle. For after the ravages of the Napoleonic Wars, the statesmen of Europe had come together to try to stop such a catastrophe from ever happening again. They created a system called the Concert of Europe, so that whenever war seemed perilously close, the nations of Europe would come together in a conference, and instead come to a settlement that all parties would abide by. But Europe has changed since those weary of the Napoleonic conflicts first came together to create the Great Concert. The first and most major change was the formation of Germany. At the time our story begins, it's important to remember Germany as a nation was only 40 years old. It's a young nation, a strong one, a nation looking to claim its own. But to say that Germany was a strong nation is to undersell the magnitude of its creation. I mean to say that the birth of Germany was something perhaps unique in the history of the world. For overnight, with the signing of a few papers, the middle of Europe was transformed from 1,000 tiny squabbling states to the greatest land power the world had ever known. In one night, suddenly the most powerful nations of Europe, Russia, France, Austria-Hungary, and England, were not the most powerful nations in Europe any longer. Overnight, in the very heart of Europe, had been created a nation with more manpower, natural resources, and economic strength than any other nation in the world except perhaps for Great Britain. Moreover, this creation was cemented in the defeat of France, which at the time was considered the strongest land power in Europe. And at the time of our story, that defeat and its memory still run deep. And now, look at the world from the perspective of that powerful new German nation. Here they are, arguably the most powerful country in the world, and yet they see themselves being denied all the rights of a great world power. Britain and France held territories across the globe. Even the Netherlands, a nation which the might of the new Germany could wipe off the face of the earth in a week, had colonies from Asia all the way to Africa. But Germany, for all of their strength, had been denied those possessions simply because their nation was young. Imagine what this does to the balance of power. Imagine what this does to the geopolitical scene. Think what would happen today if, say, the entire EU declared themselves a single nation with a single economy, a single military, and a single foreign policy. Imagine if they said that they wanted greater access to Middle Eastern oil, and Russia and the United States said, no, we were here first. Imagine now if representatives from Russia and the United States smiled and told this young nation that they'd be happy to continue to sell them oil at an inflated price, though. This was the position Germany found itself in. How was the Concert of Europe, a system built around a balance of power and compromise, to last in these circumstances? And yet, for 40 years, it did. And this brings us to the second major change since the Napoleonic Wars. The men. The 70 years after those wars was a time of giants, men who towered over the world stage. Time and again here, Europe rolled well on the dice of history and came up with leaders who were capable of navigating an increasingly complex and increasingly modern geopolitical world. In the 1800s, Russians saw men like Alexander II, who understood that Russia needed to modernize to survive. He began dismantling serfdom, reformed judicial practices, encouraged universities, and pursued peace, understanding that Russia was in no position to fight the major European powers. Like all the men here, this guy was not all chuckles and sunshine. Alexander II brutally suppressed revolutionaries and separatists in the territories Russia controlled. Still, he was effective, without question. By 1900, we have in Russia Nicholas II, a deeply reactionary, deeply conservative man, who history records as being of middling intellect, with neither the training nor the inclination to properly rule. His reign is a catalogue of embarrassing mismanagement. This is the man who fell under the sway of the mystic Rasputin. This is a man who couldn't even coordinate his own coronation. A man who let 1,300 people die in a human stampede on the day he was crowned, because, I kid you not, there was not enough beer and pretzels. And this is the man who held a ball that day anyway, because, hey, why let a few hundred deaths spoil your day? And this is the man who will, in the end, hold the fate of the world in his hands. And by this point in Austria, we have as emperor an 84-year-old man, 2 years away from his death and battered by the weight of the life he's led. His foreign minister, Berthold, is neither a bad man nor a stupid man, but he is a weak and vacillating man at a time when European politics are all about strength. And Germany? Germany, during the 20 years following its creation, had unquestionably one of the greatest diplomats the world has ever seen, Otto von Bismarck. This is a man of great ability and great appetites, a man known to smoke 3 cigars at once and down a bottle of champagne at breakfast, a man who probably deserves an entire episode just to himself, but for our purposes, he is the man who held the concert of Europe together under the incredible strain of the creation of the new German state.
I've had a lot of you guys ask me to do a series on him as well, and I will do that. I should have done that probably before doing this series, before we do the Great War series, but like again, this all snuck up on me. I forgot about this. So I will be doing a series on him. It'll just be at a different time.
His life's work was to ensure that France and Russia never allied, so that Germany would never be surrounded. This was his nightmare, his greatest fear. And in this, like in many things, he turned out to be right. He famously said that the great European conflagration would come from some damn fool thing in the Balkans, and he warned Kaiser Wilhelm II that within 20 years, his bellicose policies would destroy the Kaiserreich. And he was correct almost to the day. But he was fired by Kaiser Wilhelm II, who has too much historical baggage to get an accurate view of. Suffice it to say that the Kaiser often ends up with a reputation for feeling inadequate. Having been born with a withered arm and grown up hounded by his mother, he came to believe that he had to prove he was masculine, and so set out to break with Bismarck's policies and show that he was his own man by abandoning the German alliance with Russia and moving Germany towards a much more expansionist stance. He was known for being brash and impulsive, with little tact, crumbling the carefully balanced alliances that had for so long kept the concert of Europe in place. Now to all this, we have to add one last piece to the stage. Fear. The fear of the dying empires. The fear of those once great nations that now so clearly saw the shadow of death approaching them from behind. The Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Russian Empire. The Ottoman Empire was long known as the sick man of Europe. Its decline had been long and slow, with the surrounding nations taking bites out of its carcass as it slowly died. The Austro-Hungarian Empire looked at the fate of the Ottomans and saw shadows of what was to come. They feared they'd be like the Ottomans, dismantled, taken apart piece by piece until they were too weak to fight back. They had once been the most powerful state in Europe, but they ruled over many nations and many peoples, and over the 19th century those peoples had asserted themselves, crying out for their own nations, crying out to be free, to, as people, decide their own fate. And so, through the 19th century, the Austro-Hungarian Empire saw its territory chipped away, as the other great nations of the concert of Europe ruled in their conferences that those people had a right to be free. And with each loss, those peoples that the Austro-Hungarian Empire still maintained control of agitated for their own freedom to a greater and greater extent, causing unrest that rocked the empire to its very core. And lastly, we have the Russians. The Russian Tsars ruled the largest country in the world, but, like the Ottomans, their military, economy, and infrastructure were woefully behind the times. And in 1905, when the Russians lost a war with the Japanese, the first time a European power had lost a war to an Asian one in modern history, their weakness became eminently clear to the world. This loss caused a revolution that forced the Tsar to accept a parliament and a constitutional monarchy. But it wasn't in the nature of Alexander II to accept a parliament, and he rebelled against these constraints, leaving his country precariously perched on the verge of revolution. So with a new superpower in the midst of Europe, fear driving crumbling empires to irrational and desperate decisions, and a group of leaders simply not equal to their forebearers at the task of guiding the ships of state, the players are all in place. The stage is set, and the curtain begins to rise on the war to end all wars. Join us next time for an improbable assassination, the death of a prince, and a sandwich which changed history.
Okay, very, very interesting. I actually like this channel. He talks fast, but he presents it in a way that's easy to digest and easy to understand, I feel like. And he just seems to like lay it all out. And I don't know, I guess just an easy way to understand is what I'm trying to say. So I really, really like that. It's kind of like oversimplified, but without all of the, you know, jokes and stuff. This is new information for me about Germany. I've, of course, had a lot of you guys mention Otto von Bismarck before. I didn't know he was a diplomat. I actually didn't know. You guys have told me he was responsible for, like, bringing Germany to, or establishing Germany or something like that. And he might be. But, of course, this talked about him as like a diplomat, but I didn't realize, of course, in a lot of my other videos, like the Napoleon videos especially, Germany, you guys have explained to me, was more of just like a geographical term. It wasn't an actual country. So seeing this video like explain Germany coming together as a country and how that kind of changed Europe and the balance of power, and how Germany started to get a little upset that they weren't being respected as a country like a lot of the other powers were, especially with all of the resources they had and stuff. So yeah, this is new information. I hadn't actually, now that I actually think about it, I didn't know that Germany was that new of a nation. It's newer than the US, isn't it? Then, because this took place in the 1800s, right? When that happened. So I, for whatever reason, thought that Germany was a really ancient, well, not ancient, but a country that had been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, just like France and Great Britain and Spain and everything. I, now putting all the pieces together, to realize that Germany was more of just like a fragmented, what he said, like nation states that didn't come together as a country until like the 1800s. I don't know the exact date, but it's kind of blowing my mind right now, because I grew up my entire life thinking Germany had been a country for a really long time, like for centuries. Okay. And the fact that they were a brand new country is what sparked off a lot of these world wars. So I'm having to piece all of this information together in my head for the first time, because I had never thought about the Europe or the world in that way before. I don't think I ever really like learned this in school. I mean, of course we do study world history and European history, so maybe it was taught, but for whatever reason I don't remember it. And just always assumed that Germany had been around for a long time as a country. So yeah, I don't know. It's like weird. It's like one of those things where your entire like perception of something is completely altered. That's how I feel about this right now. Also, you know, with World War I and with Germany, those two revelations of like how World War I really changed the world, and how Germany is a fairly new country, actually. So, I'd be curious to know, do you guys over in Europe view Germany, like, I know you guys view the United States as like a baby country, basically, like a really young country. Do you guys view Germany in the same way, or no? Because it's kind of always been there, but not as just like an official country. So do you guys, I guess you wouldn't view it that way, because the US was truly like just first established not that long ago, whereas Germany was kind of always there, I guess, involved in Europe. And they just kind of like took on a different form more recently. So maybe you guys don't feel the same way about it now that I think about it. But I'm actually looking forward to part 2, 3, and 4, I guess. There were 5 books there, so maybe on the intro graphics, maybe it's 5 parts. But we'll do one a day. Let's do that. Let's do one a day, and then as soon as I'm done with this, I will post the first Great War video. How's that sound? I'll do that. Okay. Alright, thanks guys for watching. Look for the next part 2 of this, I guess, tomorrow. Answer my questions down in the comments. Actually, I don't know if I had any questions, but if you have anything to add in the comments, please do that. Also, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet, and check out my links to social media, Discord, Patreon, all of that in the description and in my pinned comment if you want to. Roger here, and I thank you guys for watching as always, and we'll see you next time, tomorrow.